Hey everyone, it's Lev from Trotec Laser Canada, and I'm here with Anthony Gibson, also from Trotec Laser Canada. Welcome to all our viewers across the country and around the world. We've actually had requests for a CorelDRAW Basics webinar, and here we are. Good, Anthony. Say hi to everyone.
Great, thanks, Lev. Hey everybody, welcome back to another basics training for your laser. So we're going to start by opening up our CorelDRAW application here. We have X8. To answer one question right off the bat, you should be able to use any version of CorelDRAW, especially if you can export to a PDF. Your laser should be able to read anything that you have with the print function. So to start, we'll make a new file. You could come here and easily click on a new file or go File, New. From here, we'll start our new file. Just going to want to name your file. Give it a width of 20 by 15. And it's always important to use RGB for your primary color mode. The laser is going to recognize the colors that you send to it only if they're RGB. So if you have a CMYK, for instance, or any other kind of palette here, you're going to want to switch it to RGB. After that, you should be good. If you need to change anything else, go ahead and make your changes and create your new file. So from here, you'll see that Corel has opened up our new file with our new size of material. And I'll just quickly go over some of the more important things that we'll be going over in CorelDRAW. So on the top here, you'll see that we have a lot of configurations that you can have here. When you select any object or text, this menu up here will change according to whatever you are selecting to make your quick and simple changes here. We'll move down here to this tool right here. It's called the Pick tool. With this tool, you can move around your objects. We have our Shape tool. We have our different shapes and texts. Down here at the bottom, you'll see your recently used colors and our pen outline as well as fill. On the right-hand side, you'll have your color palette, and it's always good to make sure that it's RGB. So to start, we'll start with our text. So go down and click on your text. Now with your text, you could click anywhere on the screen once or click and drag to create a text box if you need your text to be a certain parameter. So once you have your text box or your text line ready to go, you can simply type in whatever you want. And at the top here, you can see you can change your font to whatever you may want it to be, or your font size here. Making sure that your font and your text is selected before making any changes. Now, text is great because it's an easy way to start with your laser. You can easily make some text and send it to your laser and engrave anything that you'd like. So to start, if you wanted to engrave, you would use a black text here, making sure that it's RGB like we said. If you wanted to change your color, or if this was empty, maybe you had no color selected, you can easily come here at the bottom, select your fill and your color, making sure that RGB is selected. And you'll know it's black when everything is 0. Now, if you wanted to cut this text out, it's very simple in CorelDRAW. Just come down here to your outline pen tool, double click. Now, for the laser to recognize your outline as a cut line, you'll have to use a hairline for your width. Again, hairline is the only way your laser will recognize your cut line. Now, here at Trotec, we like to use red for our cut lines, but you could always use any color you like. Keeping it simple is always better, so we like to use red here, making sure it's 100% red in the RGB palette here. If you'd like,
just to just to confirm, so the hairline is the thinnest line possible, right?
Right.
So
So
for Illustrator, it'd be like they don't have hairline in Illustrator, but in this case, it's the thinnest line you could possibly make. Correct.
correct.
Okay.
So you're just going to want to assign your cut line a color. This can be, we like to use red, blue, or green. If you need more colors later on down the road, you could always select another color, making sure it's always 100% an RGB color. You'll know it's 100% when you see 255 here. So now that our color is selected and we have our hairline width, we'll click OK here. And you'll see now you have an outline of a red line. If we were to send this to the laser, we would be engraving our black and cutting out our letters afterwards. And that's a quick intro to text. You can configure your text a lot. There's many configurations up here if you wanted to change it. And if you wanted to change it some more, we have our Dockers here on the side. Quickly get into some Dockers here. Go to the top drop-down window menu. You could go to your Dockers and select any Dockers here. So you'll see if I select Object Properties, it's already selected. It'll pop up here in our sidebar. Clicking on your Object Properties will now give you more of these properties that you see at the top. You now just have
Sorry,
more.
You got stuck there for a second. Did you say that? Could you say that again?
Yeah, so your Docker here on the side, you can select your object properties. And now anything that you select, whether it be a text or a shape, you'll have more options to manipulate them than you do up here at the top.
And I guess the most important Dockers are Object Manager and Object Properties, right?
Right, so your object properties will give you more properties and functions to change anything that you have selected. And your Object Manager is very important, as anytime you select or input a new text or shape, it'll pop up here on your Object Manager. So you'll see here, if I create a new shape, it's now on top of our text. So this is important because your laser will cut in the, order that it sees these shapes and text. So if we were to send this to the laser, it would cut out our rectangle first and then our text. So how you arrange these is how your laser will go from start to finish. Is there any more questions for text, guys? We good, Lev?
No, not for now. I just wanted to quick comment on the colors. I mean, later on when we go into job control, you guys will see that there's 16 RGB colors that you can use. So the colors don't really mean anything. It's just what we assign to the colors. So the red can be engraving or it can be cutting, and you'll see that later on. So, but usually in the standard format, like the way the order of the colors work, it goes black, red, blue, and so on and so forth. So that's why we always tend to show any kind of instructional videos in those colors. But I think, Anthony, you'll go through that afterwards, right?
Yeah, we'll get into that as soon as we send it over to the laser.
Okay, perfect.
So next we'll show you our shape tool here. With your shape tool, you could create a shape, of course. You got your squares. Corel has provided you three simple shapes here: a square, a circle, or you can choose to make any polygon. If you click on the polygon and come down here to basic shapes, this is really good for people who just got their lasers. Maybe they're not too familiar with programming. Basic shapes are great because you could come up here to the top and you can see that they've provided you quite a few different fun shapes here, so you can create simple engravings and cutouts for your clients. So to create a shape, I showed you there, I'll show you again. It's very easy. We can create a square here. And up at the top here, you're always going to want to check here. They give you a lot of good options. Whether it may be if you want a rounded corner, to come here and click on your rounded corner and just give your square some rounded corners here. And because we have our lockbox here, if we were to uncheck the lockbox, I can now switch one corner at a time rather than having all of our corners switch at once. So we made our first shape. And just like our text, if we wanted to cut this out, we would select our shape, come down here to our outline pen, making sure it's a hairline width with our RGB 100% RGB red. If you wanted to fill this, to engrave it, again, you could go down to your fill, or you'll see at the bottom here, we have now we're starting to generate recently used color palette. So because we've used black in the past, here it is for quick use to use again. So just make sure that your shape is selected, and you can now click from one of these shapes at the or colors at the bottom. And there's also the color options here at the side as well. So Corel is really great for navigation. I think I like Corel the most for navigating through it. It's really easy to use. It's intuitive for beginners. So I'll just let you guys know really quick. To navigate through Corel, if you wanted to move your sheet around like this, you would just click on your scroll wheel and hold. Your hand will pop up, and now you can move your work around. If you want to zoom in, it's easy as scrolling in and out with that scroll wheel. And if you wanted to move anything, of course, you pick your pick tool, click on anything, you can move it around. So this is great because all of this can be done with a mouse. And I strongly recommend that you use a mouse for CorelDRAW because it's just going to make things a lot quicker for you and less aggravating than using a touchpad. So let's continue here. So we'll show you here, we showed you how to engrave and cut this shape out. Now this is a square, that's great. Maybe you want to manipulate your shapes to make some custom shapes. So to do that, select your shape. You're going to want to right click on it and convert it to a curve. So what that does now is gives us full capabilities to change our shape by the nodes here. So you can see here, if I zoom in, we have our handles here. So you could change your shape size. And we also have these nodes here. So using our shape tool, we can click on our specific nodes, and now nodes can be dragged to create any custom shape that you'd like. Each node also has its own handle here, and by pulling the handle you can change the curve. And curves, handles will only show up if you have a curved line. Another great thing with the shape tool, if maybe you don't want a node in a certain spot, you can always double click that node and it disappears for you. If you need a new node, you can always click on your line, and now double click on your line, and now you have a new node here. And of course the handles can be switched up to create whatever you may need. So that's pretty much a basic introduction to our shapes here and how to make custom shapes. Now if you want to get real creative and start making shapes on the fly, you can come down here to our freehand tool, and you're just going to want to click and hold and select our pen tool. So our pen tool is much like if you watched our Illustrator basics intro, it's basically a pen. So you would click one spot, click on another, and you're now creating lines. So if you continue to click, you're going to create a very cool shape here. And if you connect to your first node here, it'll close that shape. And now you have a shape for yourself. So Corel has recognized that you closed that, and it is now a shape. So you can now give it a fill or change the outline color if you like. So I'll show you really quickly with some shapes. Maybe you have multiple shapes here, and they're overlapping each other. And you might want to weld these two shapes together. Or you might want to create a new shape from the negative space here. So this is super simple in CorelDRAW. Just select both of your shapes using your pick tool. Once they're both selected, you can see up at the top here that you have a couple different options here. So if you wanted to create a boundary, you can click the Create a Boundary button here. And now Corel has made a boundary that goes around our two shapes, giving you a new shape here. If you select your two shapes again and click on back minus front, clearly it'll minus the front from the back. And this works depending on how you have your layers laid down. So again, that's where our object manager comes into play here. So you can see if I go back, we have our square on top of our circle. If I switch that up and select those two again, we now have a different shape. Out selecting these two, we will go through here and check out some of our other cool pathfinding tools. So you have Simplify, which will just trim some objects here. So now it's really cool. If you need to make an object, maybe it's an organic shape, and you want to make an outline around it only for a certain part, this would be how you do it. So now you can see our new shape here for our square. We'll go ahead and select these two shapes again and continue through here. If you trim,
just to add, if you guys are a sign maker or a trophy shop or promotional, and the client sends you a logo, you can weld that logo with a shape for your, for the outline of your cut. You can add letters. So I mean, that's where it comes in handy a lot for that.
Yeah, it's you're going to want to use your pathfinding tools up here quite a bit if you're making things on the fly. This is a great way to do it, just like Lev said. And here, so if we click trim, see you have a new shape here. I think we went over that. Have both of these selected again, and we'll go over the last one here. So here finally is our weld button. If you click weld, whatever shapes you have selected will now weld each other and make your new shape. This is somewhat like the outline, but of course, if you wanted to weld shapes and continue to weld shapes, you can do so like this. So you can continue to keep on adding shapes, whereas the outline function will not allow you to do that.
Anthony, we got a question. What about two rectangle sides? Two rectangles side by side with one edge overlapping. Can you eliminate one edge? One edge overlapping. I think if the lines of the edge are together, I think that's what they mean. If you guys want to clarify that.
So like this?
Yeah.
So with this, you can always select both of these and use your trim tool, or sorry, your weld tool. And now you have one shape that are both of those shapes. Is that what they?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay. If they have any more questions, they can always let me know, and I'll get to them when I can.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's a basic introduction to your shapes. Let's see here. We'll answer some questions that some people had here. For instance, if you were to cut out our text on some material, you can see that there are going to be some negative spaces here. And obviously these will not stay because there's nothing holding them. If you're trying to cut out some text on material, you're going to want to use a text stencil font. So these, if you just Google stencil fonts, there's many of them available for free online. We'll also provide a free stencil font in this video for you guys. So to do that, you would just select your text. You can double click here, and up here, once you download your stencil font, it should be in your fonts and all your programs on your computer now. Select your stencil font, and now you can see here where we had our inner geometries of our text. They are not going to fall out now because they have this stencil font. So this is great if you're making signs and maybe they're floating. This will be the only way you can get that done. Whereas if you had just a regular font, obviously these centers are just going to fall out and you're going to have some negative space there. Do we have any more questions, Lev?
Well, yeah, the person just clarified with a cut line still in between, but no duplicated. I've asked them what they mean, but there's no answer yet, so I'm not too sure.
Okay, well, I'll move on here. There's some other things that everyone would like to know how to do. So there's some people are wondering how we can make some registration marks. So registration marks are great if you have our laser with a vision camera system. The camera system will find your registration marks and cut out exactly where it needs to be cut out if you were to print that file. So for instance, if you had multiple squares here and you printed these out and wanted to put them into your laser afterwards and get the laser to cut them out on the fly, you can simply put some registration marks. So to do some registration marks, select your select your ellipse tool here. And by clicking and dragging, you're going to see your ellipse is more ellipse than it is a circle. So to combat that, just click and hold hold Control, and now you'll have a perfect circle no matter what. If you hold Shift and Control, that circle will now be perfect from the center out. Once your circle is done, you can see here with your handles, it is selected. You go to the top, you now have an option to change your dimensions of that circle. With the lock button selected, you want to change this circle to 0.25 of an inch. And because that lock is selected, once we press enter here, you'll see the height of the circle is also changing with it. So now that we have our circle, it is good to mention that the laser will only register your registration marks if it's 0.25 of an inch. You also want it to be 100% black. And of course, you want it to be RGB. One last step when making your registration marks is making sure that your outline is also hairline. There we go. So making sure that your width is hairline here. Now that you have your registration mark, you can right-click on your registration mark, hold and drag, and it'll ask you here if you wanted to copy it. So go ahead and copy your registration marks. We like to use at least 3 or more registration marks when we are using our vision camera system here. Obviously, the more you have, the more accurate it will be, but we think 3 or 4 is suffice. So next, just grab your registration mark.
Yeah, Anthony, sorry, one thing we should also mention, if you guys are doing any like clear acrylic, if you're UV printing on clear acrylic, it's good to actually have a diameter of a white line around it, like a thick white line, maybe about, I don't know, Anthony, if you could show like 25%, like you could put another white circle behind the black circle that's larger.
That's a really good point, yeah.
And then, yeah, this way when you're printing on a clear acrylic, like if you're doing it on white, it shouldn't have a problem, but it takes much faster with the vision camera system if it reads the registration mark with the white circle behind it.
That's correct. So to do that, if you are printing onto a clear material, maybe acrylic or glass, you're going to want to, like Lev said, put another circle behind your registration mark. So to do that, you can just you can use the edit, copy, paste, and you can see here Control-C to copy, Control-V to paste. So we'll just select our circle, Control-C to copy, Control-V to paste. So now we have another circle on top of our circle right now. We'll go to the fill here and make it white. We hold Shift and Control. We'll now enlarge that circle so it's bigger than our original circle, but you can see it's still on top. So we'll just right-click here, go to your order, and send it to the back of your page. And we'll just want to...
You don't even have to do that. You could just send it in the object manager right under the black circle. Because if you send it to the back of your page and you have other graphics, it'll go with, like behind that as well. So in the object manager, just right under it. Yeah, right there.
Yep. So if you want to do that way, it is quicker. You can always grab your circles or whatever and place them underneath or wherever they may need to be. So from here, you know how to make registration marks. You can select the 2 that you have made and copy them again and place them anywhere on your substrate. And there are your registration marks.
I should also mention that we can, I believe, do white registration marks on black acrylic or black materials as well. I believe. I'll double check, but I believe we could do that as well. Anthony, we do have a question regarding the shapes. If you want to go back, if you want to put 2 squares together, I think what they were referring to is, you know, when you have a grid of let's say if you're doing lots of tags, you're cutting, like, you're maximizing the space and you're doing a rectangle one beside another, that line that they share, so the laser doesn't go over it twice. How do you, I guess they're asking, how do you remove that? Generally speaking, we wouldn't really put, you know, squares across a grid. We would literally just use lines. But Anthony, if you want to show how to do that, so there's no duplicate line in between the shapes. I think that's what they were referring to.
I understand. Yeah, so like Lev said, you're going to want to, when you generate your artwork, it's easier to just use lines and make a grid system, so you don't have those these two lines. So for instance, if people are wondering, if you had these two lines over top of each other, you don't want your laser to come and cut this square out and then come back and cut over the exact same line again. So to combat that, you could always start off with a grid if you're doing that. If not, you can select your shape here, right click, convert to a curve, and with that you can go to your shape tool, and now that it's a curve, you can click on a line, and once that line is selected, you can delete and your line should disappear. As far as the pathfinder, I don't believe there is an option to just remove one line, one specific line. So I believe they're hoping that they can just click here and their lines will magically, one will disappear and one will stay. So unfortunately, that's not going to happen. So to clarify what I just mentioned, you're going to want to click on your shape, convert it to a curve. Once it's converted to a curve, select your shape tool, click on your line, and delete that line. So hopefully that answered that question. If you're still a little bit confused or need a better explanation, we'll address it afterwards, after the video.
Somebody did ask, what are these registration marks? I answered them in the chat, but just to reiterate, if you're printing anything, let's say if you're printing a sign like on a UV printer, you're printing acrylic with a bunch of different graphics, and you want to cut, let's say you want to cut around the shape that you're printing, there's a vision camera system that reads the registration marks on the laser and cuts where you want to cut. And I mentioned, if on YouTube search, if you type in job control vision camera system, you'll see lots of demo videos that we've done on how it works. But you know, people asked, how do we put these registration marks? That's how we do it.
Yeah, so if we were to send this file over with the registration marks, and these were red lines, our laser would know it would start up, read the registration marks, find the registration marks, and cut out our squares. So right now that doesn't seem too interesting because we have a perfectly square piece of material. But for instance, if maybe this material was an organic shape and wasn't a perfect square, you can still throw it into your laser. It'll find those registration marks and cut exactly where it needs to be cut. So if maybe there's some printing on this material and you wanted to cut out just a specific part of that picture, this would be the way that you do that.
Yeah, an easier way to understand it is the job control vision camera system connects two technologies together. So it connects any kind of printing, so either a UV printer, really any kind of printing, but on a piece of material, you put that material in the laser, and the laser finds out where it needs to cut. So that's what it's for. It's two different systems, the laser and some kind of a printing application.
Exactly. So I'll cover one more thing. It's very important. If you guys want to, if you're in production, you want to start making things in the hundreds, maybe thousands, and you want to do it efficiently, this is how you'll do that. So if maybe you're in the business of making squares and you're the best square maker in the world, so you have your first square, you want to repeat these squares, you want to have as many as you can on each material because you don't want to waste any material. So to do this, let's change our square to a cut line first, because we're going to be cutting out these squares or rectangles. Once you have it positioned, your first square positioned where you want it to be, you can then use one of your object dockers here. So we have our object properties and our object manager. We're going to want to use step and repeat. So let's go to our window drop-down menu, our dockers here, and you can find the step and repeat docker. Step and repeat. So step and repeat is a very useful tool. I'm sure all of you are going to use it. Once you have your object selected, you can come here to your vertical settings for spacing, and you're going to want to select spacing between objects. So obviously you want to use as little space as possible so you can use up as much material as possible. It is good, depending on what materials you are using, to pick the correct space. Sometimes you don't want them to be too close together, and it could cause your material to warp if maybe it's plastic or some material that is prone to doing so. So we have 0.175 inches here. We're going to go down because we're already at the top of our page, and we'll do let's do one copy here. So we can do one copy. If I press apply here, you'll see that we have one copy that had gone down, and it's spaced 0.175 inches away from the last copy. If I put in 2 here, you'll have 2 copies pop up. We have 1. Now we have our 2 shapes here. Let's center these. Selecting our 2 shapes now, we can go back to our step and repeat mode here. Going to your horizontal settings, you're going to want to select spacing between objects. And you can see our distance is set to 0.175 again. And we're going to want to copy them to the right because we're already at the left side of our page. We've already done our vertical settings for our duplication, so we'll select no offset here. We want to fill up the page as much as we can, so I'll give a guess here, and we'll do 13. So you can see here that we've stepped and repeat our objects here 13 times. This is the most efficient way to produce jigs. This is a great way to produce a jig if you want to have a perfect spacing for repeatable jobs. Maybe you have something that is getting cut out but has to be engraved afterwards. You can take this substrate afterwards and use it as a jig to place your new file, your objects in, and you're off to making squares in the hundreds. Let's go here, we'll type in 20 here. And you can see now you filled up your page. If you've gone over a little bit, just come here and delete the ones you don't need. And that's how you do step and repeat. So now you guys can make hundreds of whatever it is you're trying to make.
Oh, Anthony, sorry, before you delete those, I guess for the selection tool, Corel works a little bit differently than Illustrator. I know with Illustrator, when you drag and select objects, you just need to touch them, but with Corel, they fully have to be in the selection. So for example, if you want to select half of those squares,
yes.
Yeah.
So if I guess what Lev is saying is, if I want to select the square, I could click on the square here. It's selected. But if I want to select maybe, let's say 4 of these here, you're going to want to fully. You have to go past your object in order to select it. So I've selected these 4 here. But for instance, if I just did maybe like this, you're going to see nothing selected. So just make sure that everything's selected, or you're not going to be selecting the objects you want to have selected.
Yeah, even if it touches the other squares, as long as it doesn't select the other squares completely, yeah, like that, it could still select the square that you want. So actually, it's much easier in Corel than Illustrator to do that, what I find.
Yeah, overall, I would say that Corel, it is much easier to navigate through, and just simple things like this, like Lev mentioned, moving your substrate around. Everything's done with one hand. I haven't touched my computer at all. I've only used one hand on my mouse. So it's ease of use is just going to simplify your job, and you're going to create files quicker than you could ever do in Illustrator. But next, I guess we'll send this to job control, and we'll show you how to print from CorelDRAW to job control. So just before we do so, I'll just let you guys know, there are some quick commands. Quick commands are great to use because you want to get your jobs done as quick as you can. You can see here, I could select each product individually and move them if I wanted to. If you wanted to have this as one, select all of these objects here, or maybe half of them if you wanted to. Once they're selected, you can go ahead and right-click and group these objects. You could also use Control-G to group these. And what that does is when they're grouped, when you click on this, you can see they're all selected now, and you can move these all at the same time. And you don't have to worry about maybe if these were ungrouped, you can do Control-U. You don't have to go around and select every single square in order to move multiple squares.
Yeah, Anthony, somebody just mentioned also when you're selecting, you just did that when you click the Alt button and just click on each square individually, it'll select one after the other, like together.
Yeah, so if you hold Control.
Oh, Control, sorry.
Sorry, no, Shift. You can now select each part individual if that's what you want to do. And now you could just move these parts. And for instance, if this is a group, maybe these were going to be a different color or they're categorized in a certain way, you can just Control-G and now they're a group. So if I don't have to go back and select each individual square over and over and over, I could just click on one and now they're all selected to be moved at the same time. So again, it's really useful once you start creating more complicated files or a lot of repetition in your files. Grouping things together is always a great way to just make your job a little bit quicker and more efficient. So let's send this over to job control.
Sorry, before we do so, Anthony, did we, with the shapes, did we show them how to do flips and turns and that sort of thing?
Oh yeah, for sure. It's very easy. Again, in CorelDRAW, they made it super easy to flip something. Once you have something selected, you can see at the top here, you can go ahead and if you want to do a 90-degree angle, go ahead and type 90 and it'll flip it to 90 degrees. If you want to do something more on the fly, you can select your object and you'll see you have these handles that go around your object. If you just click your object one more time, now your handles have turned into rotation handles, which will allow you to rotate this. And when I rotate this, you can see here at the top, our number value changes. So this is great. If you want perfect exact angles, it's kind of hard to land perfectly on 0 or 90 or 180 here. So if you hold Control as you're moving your shape, again, that's Control, you will see this shape is now going to snap in 15-degree increments. So if I go back here and rotate it, there you go, 15-degree increments. So you could easily snap it to a certain degree.
And the mirrored function right next to that.
Yeah. So maybe rectangles aren't the best.
I guess with text it would be good.
Yeah, text is probably better. Okay, so.
And just before Anthony does that, like the reason we really want to do mirrors is especially for reverse engraving. So if we're using materials like the Trolleys or Troglass Reverse, where you're spray painting on the back and you're reverse engraving, you have to flip the image. Otherwise, it'll be backwards, obviously, when you engrave it. Again, you can see we have a bunch of YouTube videos. If you YouTube Trolleys Reverse or Troglass Reverse, you'll see how we do it. But this is the reason why you want to know how to mirror flip an image.
Yeah, so once you have your shape or your text or whatever it may be, make sure you select it. And from here, you'll get your mirror up here. So you can mirror your object or your text horizontally or vertically. So we'll give this a press, and you can see here that our text is flipped around. So
this is what you'll need for reverse engraving. You'll need to flip it horizontal.
So yeah, you can reverse engrave. This is great to do this from here. If you're doing reverse engraving, you could also do it from job control. This is also great. Maybe you want to have an exact duplicate of whatever's on one side of your material on the other. So if you were to draw a line down the center of your page, so we'll just go ahead and draw a line here. I'll also mention really quickly, if you press P on while any object is selected, it'll center it for you automatically. So right now our line here is perfectly centered in our page, and we want our perfect ellipse here to be perfectly mirrored on our other side of our material. So I would simply select our ellipse and select this. Hit the mirror button, and you'll see that it has flipped here.
Anthony, also in terms of centering, we should probably show them when they group objects or ungroup objects in the center. So if the objects are ungrouped, they're all going to bunch together in the center of your page. So
That's
you
a
got
point.
so like if you want to like move it away from the page and then center it, and yeah.
Yep. So what Lev is mentioning here is if you're going to be centering things, if you had a large amount of objects, you're going to want to group them first before you center them on your page using the P button. If you didn't do so, you'll see here I'll select 5 of these squares here. If I were to hit P now, they're all going to get centered in the middle of the page. So you can see I have 5 squares on top of each other here. Now if I were to group these, Control G, they're grouped now, and you can see that up here. Now when I press P, that group has now been centered to the center of the page. So just be mindful of that if you are centering things and for whatever reason it's squishing all your artwork into the center. It's most likely because you haven't grouped your artwork. Any more questions, Lev?
No, nothing yet. It was more just comments. I mean, centering is really great if let's say you have a quarter sheet of materials, 12 by 24, your job size is 12 by 24, and you want to engrave, exactly from the center. It's just a very quick and easy way to measure from the center.
Exactly. So I guess we'll get into it now. We'll go ahead and send this to job control. To do so, just go ahead and you can click here on your print icon, press Control P or File Print. So right off the bat, you're going to want to come to your printer drop-down menu and make sure that your Trotec engraver is selected. So on the right-hand side here, you'll get a preview of what's going to be getting sent to the laser. And at the top here, you'll see it says no issues. Now, for whatever reason, if our artwork was bigger than our material size, and we tried to print this now, you're most likely going to get an error.
Yeah, it's because the settings there. Yeah.
Yep. So you see here now, our materials were changed. The size of our materials were changed. So our artwork's not fitting on our materials, and you can see that by the visual description here in the preview. And up at the top here, you'll see you have an error message. It'll let you know your output doesn't fit on your media, so you'll have to change that. This is the most common error I say when printing, and you just have to make sure that your job size is fitting on your material. So to do that, make sure over here that your material size in CorelDRAW is big enough that your artwork fits onto it, but you're not done yet. So once you print, you'll have to open up your preferences here, and you have a few different options. So in here, we like to select our width as the same as our width for our material here. Now we did shrink it, so I will make it back to 20 inches here and bring it back to 15. And now this will be our size of our job when we send it to the printer.
And then you got to switch it back in Corel.
For sure.
Yep.
So you want to make sure you do this properly, so you're not wasting time going back and forth from Corel to job control. And it does get aggravating if you're not just taking the time to check your preferences and all your drop-down menus. So we'll print that. We'll send it.
Yeah, sorry, Anthony. Yeah, you didn't switch it here in Corel when you printed it.
Yeah, I just wanted to show people.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
The job is going to open up here. And here we have a new file. So we'll double click our file here. And by double clicking your file in the job queue, you'll send it to the top left corner. You can see it's a big gray square right now. So if you just come up to the eyeball at the top here, you click on this, and what you see is what you'll get. So you'll see now that it actually did print our job, and the reason why. So when printing your job, you should always have your substrate material, which is this white square, larger than what you are trying to print. So we'll change this back to 20. And now when we print, we have no errors because our artwork is falling onto our material size. So I just want to show you one more thing. There are a few options when printing. Maybe when you are printing your job, you don't want to cut out every single square. You just want to cut out our lucky square here. So we'll ungroup our squares here, click on our lucky square, and now let's send just this square to our printer. So from here, we'll go to our preferences. We'll click on just the selected. So now our laser knows that it only wants to print the selected square that we have selected right here. Now, this is great, but it's going to be cutting it in the same position that it was in the document. Maybe we want it to be cut in the center. You go to your layout over here. You can now reposition your image to the center of your page. Our preview is now updated, and you can see that it's in the center of the page. If you needed that square to be maybe in your top right corner, you could come down here and do the top right corner or whatever it may be. You could also do custom positioning by entering your position here. So we'll just go ahead and do center of the page. And I think we're good to print. So we'll print this as well. So if we go back to job control.
Could I just mention a quick common mistake that I was doing when I started using the laser, and I think it'll help.
Yeah.
If you guys are printing like a cut job and it's not red in job control, like when Anthony, you see a bunch of red squares, if they're gray, that generally means that your line isn't hairline. So if your line is a 0.2 millimeters, the laser won't see it as a cut; it'll see it as a raster file to engrave. So it'll be like gray squares, gray rectangles, as opposed to red rectangles. That's how you know that the job is right. I think that's a common mistake a lot of people do, especially in the beginning.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and say, like, if you're having any problems printing, most likely, and the first thing you should check is that your palette in your artwork was RGB. I would have to say that's where most of the problems come from.
Yeah, exactly. That too as well. And then also, if you're using more than two colors, I guess we can show them that as well.
Yeah,
you're going to show them. Okay, I was going to say for the order dithering in the colored section.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So our new file that we just sent over, you can see here, we'll double click. It's right in the center of our material. Now this is very good if this is exactly what you want. So maybe you change your mind, you've sent it over to job control, but this is in the center of your material. And you can see your material is marked by these outline squares here. And because this is the size of your material, you won't be able to place this into the corner of your laser. So in order to just send this square over by itself so you can position it anywhere onto your working area, we'll go back to CorelDRAW. We have our square selected. We'll go to print. With our selection only, go to preferences, and you could click here to minimize the job size. Now what Lev was mentioning, I'll show you here now that we're here. You have your processes, your process mode, your resolution, cut line, and halftone. So for your cut line, this is also good to mention. If you select rectangular cut line, when you're done engraving or cutting your job, I'll go back to Corel here. If this was being engraved, this is a bad example actually because it's a square, but if you had rectangular cut line selected, once your job is done, the laser will automatically go to that job and cut a perfect rectangle right around it. Now you could click circular, and that'll do the same thing with rounded corners, or optimize to cut perfectly around everything rather than having a square cutout. So because we're
yeah, sorry, I should also mention, I don't know where the users are in this case, but this software that we're showing, Job Control, is only for the Trotec laser. Just wanted to let you know. It won't work with any other laser. It's specifically for the Trotec. Just thought I'd mention that.
Yeah, and it really does make a difference. So from here, like Lev was saying, because we are using, if you are using multiple colors, so maybe you had multiple cut lines with different cut lines, different cut parameters, you'll want to use your color mode here. If you're not using the color mode, it'll only recognize one color at a time. So if you are having problems, please make sure that you're set to color mode and that your colors themselves are RGB. From here, we'll press print again. And come back to job control. So now that we've selected our cut to job, you can see here, we now have just our lonely square here, and you can place it anywhere on your working area.
This is really helpful. I guess if you're doing test runs, if you have like scraps that are not actual equal sheets and you just want to see how the cut would look like, it's a really nice thing to use.
Yeah, I use this every day when I'm testing out my material, or want to see that one square is going to cut perfectly before I cut out 100 squares.
Sorry, somebody asked if you can explain the cut line again and when you would use it. I guess the cut line in the print drive.
Okay.
If you want to use like a black circle, just so they could see.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so
or text maybe. I think text would be better.
Yeah, that is probably better. Oh, we're going to send this to our printer here. It's going to be text that says Trotec, and because it's black, the printer is going to engrave it. So if this was our, if this was our file, and we're cutting on any material, it would only engrave on the material. But we want to have this font cut out at the same time. So of course you could do that by putting a box around this hairline RGB red box, and it'll cut it for you. Or you can select whatever it is that you're trying to cut, and when you press print, and select your preferences. So your cut line here, if I have none selected, nothing's going to happen. This will our Trotec font here will get sent to the printer, and it'll be engraved on your material, whatever that material may be. Now if you selected rectangular, this is going to get engraved onto your material, and once it's finished engraving, the laser will take it upon itself to then cut this out with a rectangular shape perfectly around your font here. If you were to select the circular, it would cut this out using curved lines. So you'll have a cutout of curved lines around your engraved font here. If you selected optimized, all this is going to do is cut out around your text perfectly around each letter here.
Yeah, and this is just a quick shortcut that you can do. I mean, generally, like when we do cut lines, we actually do it right in the CorelDRAW. We either right-click to have the optimized cut around the text, or we put our own squares or circles because we know we can see what it looks like. So this is a very quick and easy shortcut, especially for testing. If you're doing testing, just click the rectangular cut line and it cuts it out and you can see it.
Exactly.
But for us, we usually use it in CorelDRAW. We put the cut lines there. And
you can see here, if I do send this to the printer will show you exactly where it's going to be cutting. So maybe you don't want to cut on an engraving that's already existing on the material that you're engraving on. So this is a good way to see what's going to be happening here. So you can see our blue lines around here. They are hard angles, and that is where our cut lines will happen. So hopefully that was able to clear things up for that person.
We got another quick question. Could you use circular when doing stamps? I guess the circular cut line.
When doing stamp?
Yeah, when doing stamps. I know there's a stamp mode in the print drive.
Okay. I'll cover that quickly. So in your preferences again, there's different process modes here. So you have your stamp mode here. And basically what that'll do is it'll reverse your, you can see here, it's giving you a preview of your Trotec logo here. It has flipped it and optimized it for making stamps. So from here, I guess if you select here, if it is an option, you could click rectangular, circular, or optimize. Now you should be able to send this to the printer and it will cut out a rectangle around this here.
Yeah, but when you're doing stamps, I would still recommend doing it in CorelDRAW, because you know exactly, you can see exactly where the cut line is going to be. I mean, this is great for shortcuts for sure. But I mean, the stamp has to fit exactly, like the rubber has to fit exactly into the stamp. So, I mean, that's just my preference, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, they also asked, somebody asked, does it change the amount of time for the job to complete when changing the cut line?
That's a great question. So when you're sending your files over to the printer, some of your files might be super large, very big, because especially if you're using the step and repeat, this is repeating objects over and over and over, maybe in the hundreds or thousands. So this is going to slow down your computer quite a bit, especially when transferring your job. So to speed that process up, go to your preferences and come here and select color. So we did say color mode is always good to have if you're using colors and doing cuts. As long as you're using only one color for your cut job, you can use order dithering, and order dithering will still recognize your cuts as cuts and your engraving as engraving. So as long as you're only using one color for your cuts, you can use order dithering, and that'll significantly speed up the time it takes to send a job to job control. So there shouldn't be there will be maybe 1 or 2 seconds of loading time if I were to send this over to job control right now as order dithering. If I sent it over and there was maybe multiple colors with hundreds of squares here as a color mode, the computer and the program and the laser now have to calculate more things, because there's now 16-bit colors in there. So it's just going to take a little bit longer to load. Of course, if you have a super high-end computer, that shouldn't be a problem for you. But if you're running this on maybe a laptop, you might want to select order dithering mode just to speed up your printing times.
Yeah, most of the time when we use the colored section is for cutting. We use for kiss cutting. So if you're, I mean, I think Anthony, you'll go get into kiss cutting a little bit later. But for engraving, if you want to do different colors, specifically if you wanted different depths of engraving. So if you have 3 different colors and you want 3 different types of power settings for, you know, deep engraving, just grazing, and so forth, that's where the color would come in, the colors.
Exactly. So yeah, I'll give you an example of everything we were just mentioning here. So we'll send this over to the printer, and you can see here I filled in 1 square with black, 1 with blue, and made a couple of the other squares green here. So we'll go to our preferences just to make sure everything's in good order. We have our standard process mode. It should be fine. And we have selected color because we're using multiple colors here. You can do inner geometries first. That'll make sure if you're doing a text here, if you're cutting this text out, it'll cut out the inner parts of the text first. And this is good practice to have this checked off, as it could cause problems when using larger materials or maybe thin materials like paper, because some of your piece could move before you cut out the inside geometries here. So we'll go ahead and press Job Control and send this to the printer. Now sometimes your file will take a little bit to load, so you'll just see there it took maybe a little bit of more time to send that file over, just because there is multiple colors now. Sometimes you'll be waiting for a long time and you can't see your job. If this ever happens, just hit Show All here and it should pop up. Sometimes if you're engraving in different modes, it'll only show jobs within that job mode. So if for whatever reason your job's not popping up, go ahead and click Show All, and that should solve that problem. So from here, we'll click on our new job, double click, and it'll send it to the top corner here. You can see that our green squares are missing, and that is because if you click on our material settings here, or you could also just click anywhere, double click on your working area, you'll bring up your material database here. So from here, you'll see you have a series of colors. Black we'll use for positioning. We'll get into that a little bit later. For black, we'll use engraving. So anywhere you see black here, it's going to engrave. So our square here is going to get engraved, and our Trotec will get engraved. And this little circle here. For our red lines here, we're going to use cut because we want to cut out our squares that are red. For our blue, we want to engrave. It's blue though, and it's blue because we want to assign different parameters to it. So let's engrave that blue square. You can see our black square is going to be using 20 power and 40 speed, and our blue square will have alternate power and speed setting. So this is good if you want to have different depths for different engravings. Again, it's all up to you. The sky's the limit when it comes to what you can do with your creativity with your design programs.
Yeah, like one application where we do two different engravings is when we engrave paper. So when we have like a very general engraving on a piece of Bristol board, and then if there's a very fine engraving that we want to do, like a very small text, we generally do a different settings for that engraving. Like we usually go slower with lower power, so it gives it like that more of that fine detail, so that text is visible. I think that's an application, a real world application. You would use two different kinds of engraving settings.
Exactly. Or there's also like with the Trotec laser, you can easily control the parameters of your laser, like we showed you here. And with different combination of different speed settings and power settings, you can have one engraving show up as a light brown, and your blue one can turn out as a dark black. So this is again, it's all up to what you want in your outcome, but it's really endless when it comes to the possibilities of what you can do with this.
And actually, yeah, sorry to interrupt. That's a great thing that you're showing, the engrave, cut, engrave. We always want the cut to be last. Usually we want it to be last, because if you cut first and then engrave, what happens is the material, like let's say if you're cutting the letter A, if you first cut it, the material kind of drops a little bit in the laser, right? So if the position can be changed a tiny bit, but if you're engraving over it after, like if you got some kind of a pattern, you can see a difference of like the offset can be visible. So we definitely suggest to cut at the very end. So yeah, Anthony, if you want to show how you can switch the colors around.
Yeah, so it's super easy to switch your colors around. If you already have something set up, it might be a pain to go and switch all your parameters again. So you can just easily click on your color and drag it, and your engraving is all at the top and all your cuts are at the bottom.
Yeah, and this is what we meant in the beginning when we talked about the colors. So there's 16 different RGB colors, and then that's where you set in Corel. Those are the most important colors you need to work with, because essentially those are your settings for the laser. Each color you can set your own setting for engraving, for cutting, for positioning, which is for registration marks. But that's really why you need the colors and why you specifically need those 16 colors. But when you get job control in the beginning, it's always in that sort of standard black, red, blue, and so on and so forth. But like Anthony just showed, you can switch them around.
Yeah, and if you ever maybe forgot what the value of your color has to be, again, it's always going to be 100%, whatever your color is. If it's a basic color, RG or B, red, green, or blue. And so if you ever do forget, you can come here to your material database settings, and if you hover over your color, it'll give you the values right here for your R, your G, and your B. So black is all zeros, blue you can see here, and your blue is 255, red is, and your red's 255. So again, I'll show you really quickly in your artwork file here. If you were to select an object, let's select our blue here. You can see down here, our R is 0, green is 0, and blue is 255. And 255 is the highest value of blue that you can give yourself. So we're RGB, blue, 255. It even gives us the name down here. In your version of CorelDRAW, maybe it's a little bit newer or a little bit older. This might be a little bit different, but overall, this should be the same, and you can always input your values. So from here, we're missing some squares still, and that is because our color green has been skipped. So we'll go down here to our drop-down menu, and we're going to cut. For this, we're going to kiss cut, though. There is an option to kiss cut. Basically, what a kiss cut is, if you're not familiar with it, is we're going to cut just the surface of our material. The reason why we want to do that is if you were to cut something out and you wanted to place it in an exact position, you can kiss cut that position, so you can then use your cutout to place on top of that position. And we'll go over that a little bit more very shortly, so you can understand that a little bit more. So we have our green selected, we're going to cut, and because it's a kiss cut, we'll go with a super low power here. Let's do 5. It might be different for your laser. Maybe you have a higher wattage or a lower wattage, so just be very cautious with this. I would start with a very, very low, even start at 1 if you're not too sure, and just run the job and increase this power until you start to see a mark show up on your material. And for this, you can really speed this up because it isn't that much power and you don't want to cut all the way through your material. So from there, if we press OK, you'll see our green squares are now are showing. So if we were to ready this to our laser and press play, we will now get an engraving of a square, a different depth of an engraving. We'll cut out all of our squares and kiss cut all these squares. So these kiss cuts aren't going to cut right through our material. They're just going to be markings on top of our material. And why you would want to do that is if you, for whatever reason, wanted to place one of these cutout squares perfectly into position, you now have these markings on your material to take your cut square and place it perfectly onto your square here, your kiss cut square.
This is specifically, beneficial for sign makers. I mean, if you're making a sign and the background is clear acrylic, so let's say if you're using a huge shape like a 24 by 48 shape, and you want to place your letters, your logos on top of the acrylic, and you need the exact position, you would do the kiss cut on the clear acrylic, and then you would do a full cut on whatever color acrylic or lamicoid you want, and then glue that on top of the clear acrylic. So we have, again, lots of videos on YouTube where we show the kiss cut method. You want to see it in action, but this is how you basically do it.
Yeah, so I'm just trying to show you guys just a quick example of maybe with some text here. So here I have a basic square that I'll be cutting out of our material, whether it be wood or acrylic. We'll select our first Trotec here. We have a hairline width with an RGB red value. Press OK. And we've made and selected and copied the exact same text in a different location. Let's put it at the top corner here, or bottom right corner here, because why not? And now we can select all of these objects and send them to our printer. So with our new file, you can see here, we'll be cutting out a square, and from that square, we'll cut out our Trotec letters, and they're gonna fall out. So we want to place them, but we wanna make sure that they're in the exact same spacing between the letters, and we want it to basically turn out exactly like this. To ensure that that's going to happen, we've made some kiss marks here on our cutout piece of wood. And because they're just fine marks that are barely noticeable by the human eye, you can now drag your cutout pieces of wood and put them on top of your kiss cut. And you can rest assured that they're going to be perfectly positioned and look great for your clients. So from here, I'll show you a couple more things. You click on your file here, you can see in the left-hand corner, we have our colors that we are using, and you have a value here of your time, how long your job's going to take. You can see here, at first this looks like it's going to take quite a long time, but if you come down here to the bottom and hit update, your computer will recalculate and give you the correct time. You just want to keep on clicking update until these numbers stop changing. And now at the bottom here, you'll see your overall production time should be just over 11 minutes. So this is great if you're doing files, or maybe you have a large production run. You can easily quote your clients depending on how much time. And again, we say here that you should probably be charging between $250 to $350 an hour for any job. And that is a simple way to calculate how much your job is going to be.
Yeah, or if you're a makerspace or a school that's renting out the laser to users, and you charge by the minute. I know a lot of makerspaces and fab labs use $1 per minute. That's how you can check. And I believe in job control, like based on the runs, you can get a report, not a report, but you can see how long the laser has been running for a specific job. But in terms of quoting for future jobs, that's a great tool to use.
Yeah, that's a really good useful. Or even if you have scheduled appointments, you know exactly how long each job's going to take, so you can schedule appointments accordingly. So from here, I think, is there any more questions, Lev?
There is one thing about parameters, but I was going to show the grayscale matrix. I can show that at the very end. I mean, we're kind of over an hour. How much more do you think we have to cover?
I'm pretty much good here. I could quickly show you about the relief mode.
Well, the relief mode is more on our 3D engraving webinar. So if you guys, it's the one that we did a few weeks ago. Was there anything specific that you wanted to show on it for the relief?
No, just a basic introduction to relief mode there.
Yeah, I mean, we talked in depth for the relief on our 3D engraving webinar. So if you guys want to see how that works, you can check out the video. It's in our training playlist. Just one thing about parameters. So, I mean, when you're Anthony, I'm just going to share my screen here, if you don't mind for a second.
Yep.
So I'm going to share this link on our website. It's actually on our website. If you go to Knowledge, you go Tips for Laser Users, and there's lots and lots of cool tips and tricks that we have here. And if you go to Laser Parameters, first of all, we actually have laser parameters already there. trying to find it here. Right here, laser parameters and basic settings. So it'll give you a breakdown of where you can find the laser parameters, and this is a really nice thing for a grayscale matrix. I mean, we won't get into this now. It's a little bit more advanced. But if you go here to determination of the laser parameters with the grayscale matrix, what this does is it'll actually show you the perfect engraving that you want to do. So you would basically put that matrix into the job control, and you'll set your power, and it'll show you exactly what each setting output will look like based on these little squares. So, I mean, if you want to learn more about it, just click on our website and learn about it here. We can't go into it now because it'll take a bit more time, and we're kind of past the hour already. But this is what it'll look like on wood, just to give you an example. Once you engrave it, so you can pick, okay, I want this exact etching, the 30 by 4 setting or something like that. So it's a nice way to check parameters as well. Somebody just asked, what about Corel for the Mac? I mean, from what I know, you can use Corel for the Mac, but the job control for the laser only works with a PC drive. So a lot of the our clients who have a Mac, they do their design in a Mac, but they have like a small little laptop by the laser where they import the files in job control. Just to answer your question. But Anthony, am I right? Corel can obviously use it on a Mac, I believe.
Yeah, and of course you don't want to have to buy two versions of Corel for one computer that's only there to print. So, if you're designing on your Mac, just save it or export it as a PDF, and you should be able to send it to the printer, and it'll work perfectly fine.
Right. Perfect.
And I also just like to say, like, if you get on the YouTube channel, we provide, I'm sure you guys are on the YouTube channel right now, we provide a lot of projects for you guys, and with these basic with the basic intro that we just gave you, you can take those files and manipulate them so you can customize them for your clients and your business.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you very much, Anthony. So thank you, everyone, for your time. We'll definitely be doing more of these, and send us your requests. We'll definitely take them into consideration. We did this webinar just because one of the users emailed us after the Illustrator webinar and said, hey, what about Corel? And there you go. Corel's done. So we'll definitely get you guys a lot more stuff. Thank you, Anthony, and yeah, we'll see you next time.
See you guys.
Thanks, guys. Take care.